questions at any point. Recording is apparently in progress. So if you have questions at any point, feel free to put them in the chat. Feel free to raise your hand electronically, and we will get to as many questions as possible. But I'm Wonbo Woo. I served as an adjunct faculty member at Newmark for close to a decade. I worked at ABC, I worked at NBC, I worked at Wired, and I have been thinking a lot about these issues, as everybody has. I think you know, legacy media has been chasing all sorts of new viewers for a very long time, and they've been going to whatever platforms they could think of, websites, Facebook, YouTube, Snapchat, Quibi, Instagram, and TikTok is one of the more recent places where we've seen a lot of creators, and it's been great for legacy media, and it's been great for independent creators as well, to be in that environment. But all of the rules of how people are getting their news and how people are sharing information is all sort of changing. And some of that's motivated by business considerations and some of it's by editorial. And so the idea behind today's panel was really to bring together some people who are finding success on all sorts of different panels, and have them share some of their thoughts on where we're headed and how they've gotten to where they are and what's working. So we have a really great panel today, and I'm going to crib from my notes now, but we have a really amazing panel here today, and I'm so excited to have you hear from all of them. Madeleine Haeringer was supposed to be on this panel. She's unfortunately having a medical issue and cannot be here. But our three guests are Raney Aronson and John Friia and Dave Jorgensen. Raney Aronson-Rath is the executive producer of Frontline. Under her leadership, the show has won every major award in the industry. Peabody's, DuPont's, they recently won their 100th Emmy, and they've earned 2 Academy Award nominations, as well as their first gold baton that the DuPonts have awarded in a decade. Frontline releases more than 20 feature-length docs per year by producers including our very own Travis Fox, and directors like Yoruba Richin, the head of the documentary program, who co-directed American Reckoning, which premieres on February 15th. 5 years ago, Frontline put their first full documentary on YouTube. There are now more than 130 full-length episodes up. They have 1.35 million subscribers and have had 230 million views on YouTube with an average watch time of 28 minutes, which for anyone who follows things like metrics for YouTube is really big. Raney was previously a reporter, producer, and director for Frontline, ABC News, and the Wall Street Journal. Dave Jorgensen has been joined the Washington Post in 2017 as a producer working on the Department of Satire on YouTube, covering everything from the Westminster Dog Show to the National Spelling Bee and interviewing kids with a very signature light touch. In 2019, he launched the Post TikTok channel, posting skits that play off the news. The channel took off pretty quickly and now has 1.2 million followers on TikTok. Last year, he published this book, Make a TikTok Every Day, 365 Prompts for Attention-Grabbing TikToks, interviewing creators and offering a ton of ideas on how to produce viral short-form content. John Friia is a Newmark grad from the class of 2017. He's a producer for News 12 Long Island and spent 2 years at New York One before joining Fox News as a writer in the run-up to the 2020 election. In 2020, he also started here in New York producing content about life in the city for TikTok. His videos cover everything from small apartment living to the MTA's Omni system to the history of New York City landmarks. He now has 185,000 followers on TikTok, and his videos have earned him 6 million likes. John is now a full-time creator. So please join me in thanking all of our guests for being here. And let's get started. Raney, I think I want to start with you, actually.
Okay.
You know, this is this isn't you know, there's a lot about this YouTube strategy that you launched, which is surprising, right? This isn't you know, it's not your father's Frontline. Why did you
father? Maybe that's why. Everyone always says that, and I'm like, yeah, maybe because, you know, no, but go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask, why is this such an important part of your strategy for Frontline? And are you surprised by the success there?
Oh yeah, I mean, we were completely surprised because we started out doing short form on YouTube in the first place, and this is 7 or 8 years ago. We had a partnership. We were going to do tons of short form. But then the minute that I got permission from PBS to put our actual documentaries on YouTube, and they went completely viral in our terms, right? We're PBS after all, so viral is within 1 million, 2 million. It's not like 50 million, which is what my son thinks is viral, by the way. And basically people were watching for more than, we thought at first maybe they would watch for 3 or 4 minutes, but you mentioned our watch time, and that just grew over time. And we have now permission to release all of Frontlines, like our documentaries, onto YouTube. And it's a whole new generation of people who are watching us there. In fact, it is oftentimes our biggest audience. And that's a huge game changer, right? That means people, in this case for Frontline, the audience is in their 20s and 30s, are actually watching Frontline. They're watching investigative documentary filmmaking, right? And so for me, as a public mandate, right, we're public media, just reaching younger people with actually fact-based investigative work is really phenomenal, right? And they're not going to the PBS channel and clicking, right? They're already cord cutters. I was a cord cutter. So I feel like a lot of us are like, where we want to be, where we are watching our media, and YouTube is just a natural environment. And one last thing before you go to these really interesting folks is that, and they're TikTok style, so they're going to be quicker. Is that one of the things that we've learned is that actually really important issues resonate with younger people. This won't surprise any of you who are teaching, who are students yourselves, but social justice issues, racial equity issues, issues of inequality, this is what this generation cares about. So our content and our work actually really resonates with them. So in the earnest department, not thinking of audience growth and monetization, that is hugely gratifying to someone like me who just really wants to continue doing this really important work.
That's awesome. How hard was it convincing them to go along with this idea?
Yeah, so PBS, we're exclusive to the PBS platform, and it took a long conversation, but really the thing that changed everything, is really obvious in hindsight, is to really say, this is a totally different demographic that's on YouTube versus PBS, right? That took, a few months and a bunch of PowerPoints, and really smart woman named Carla Boras, who I mention all the time because she's my partner in crime on this. And we basically created an argument that said, let us do a pilot. And the new person who was running digital at PBS said, let's try it. And then it just kept going and going. And it's the pilot that keeps giving, because we're 2 years in and all of our films are out there. We actually premiere on YouTube the same time the film goes on the broadcast and streams on PBS now. So this has revolutionized Frontline. Now we're all thinking like, what's the YouTube audience going to be? Really, really new era for us. It's exciting.
For those of you who have not worked in legacy newsrooms, that is a very big deal also. That's it is a sea change, the idea of not being broadcast first.
Right.
Dave, I'm going to turn to you next. How did the Washington Post TikTok channel come to be?
Mostly by accident. But basically, yeah, you sort of teed it up perfectly. I when I first started at the Post in 2017, I was working on this YouTube page called Department of Satire. And so I had been hired to help reach that younger demographic that we're all talking about, that, the holy grail of viewers. And we were doing okay on YouTube, and I did kind of figure out the right voice, which is that, you want to represent a 144-year-old newspaper, but you also want to like represent what people want to see on YouTube. So I was starting to do that and apply that there, but it wasn't the success that I would have wanted, and I imagine the people above me would have wanted. With the YouTube channel. I think we had like 10,000 subscribers or something like that. And then when I found out about TikTok in late 2018, I was like, this is it. This is the one. I was just selfishly very excited that you could just edit with music. You could just, take a Britney Spears song and use it for free and no one was going to sue you. That was very exciting. That has since changed, but that was very exciting for the first year. And two, it was just very clear that, at that point, there was already 1 billion downloads of the app. This is early 2019. And I just, there's an audience here. This is the Gen Z and millennial audience that we had been looking for. And so there is a lot of parallels here to what Raney was saying. And so I even down to the PowerPoint, except I'd had a 8-page document and I got all the important people in the room and hand them each one of these documents, and it was just way too much information about why we should be on TikTok. And I think I don't normally do that, so they were just like, well, he must mean it. And so just a couple months later, the head of video came by my desk and said, why don't you just try it out today and keep it under the radar? And I did the former, but not the latter. I immediately tweeted it out and made sure everyone knew that we were on TikTok. And within about a week, we had more followers on TikTok than we had ever got on that YouTube channel I'd spent 2 years on. And pretty quickly, I think by the time, about 9 months later, 10 months later, when March 2020, when the pandemic began, we had about, I think like 400,000 followers. And then that just shot right up when all of a sudden, all of my peers, all my fellow millennials downloaded TikTok as well. Now my parents are on it. So we really got in early, which helped, but also we were able to kind of get in early enough to sort of be a trusted voice on the app. There are plenty of other news organizations on the app and they all do a great job. But what was really the huge advantage we had was that we were kind of on the app already playing around before anyone else even got on it. And so people recognized the Washington Post as one of their trusted news sources on the app, which is obviously very gratifying.
Can I just add one thing is super interesting about Dave's work is because I do have a 15-year-old boy that like one day, because I know his work, I'm like jealous of it because I think it's awesome. And like, we just don't have that DNA Frontline to be that cool. And it's just like, it's so great, right? And so he goes on to TikTok really early, like before we were really aware of TikTok. And my son comes in, and I'm not joking, one evening, and he says to my husband, who's a journalist, Arun Rath, like we're both journalists. He said, have you all heard of the Washington Post? And we're like, yeah. They're like, he's like, you got to see this cool stuff. It's like I think it's the Washington Post. And we're like, we're so dead, So I just want to do a shout out, like, because it really resonated with my son, who's like a teenager, and that's how he learns about the Washington Post, right? Because we get the Times, sorry.
That's the best thing anyone ever could have said. That's so great. And that's exactly, yeah. And it's funny because my experience was exactly the same in terms of people for a long time thought my name was Washington, like Washington, and I was posting. People would say, once we figured out we were in a place called Washington, they're like, I'm in Seattle. Are you nearby? Like, no, not at all. That there's a lot of jokes we'd made early on about Watergate, and we realized people thought gate is just something you add to the end of controversies. They didn't understand the origin. We did a TikTok where we pretended, like, basically did a deep throat reenactment in our parking garage, and half the audience had no idea what was happening. So it's in the best way. So it was really fun to sort of introduce ourselves to a new generation that understandably has no idea who the Washington Post is, because they've gotten all their news online or via different apps and everything. And as the Post tries to become a national newspaper, that this was a natural escalation of that.
Thank you. John, I want to bring you in here. Talk about how you made your channel happen and sort of how you made that progress and how you launched into being a brand unto yourself.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I was working for Fox News back in 2020, and my hours were crazy. I was 1 a.m. to 10 a.m. and my kind of getaway was hopping on a city bike and just exploring the city and just shooting videos. And I did a video about how small my kitchen was, and it blew up. I mean, at that time it was like 2 million views, which is crazy to think. Like, now you have Axel, who's living in like the New York smallest apartment, and he has millions and millions of followers. But then I noticed that my niche was like New York City. And from there, I was testing out what type of New York City content worked, and a little bit of the New York City restaurants and things to do in the city was working. And then what really took off was the historical videos. And I grew up loving history. And I always said to myself that I probably should have been a history teacher, but I ended up doing this, and it took off. And now I left Fox in November 2020. Actually, the day after the election was my last day there. And I just followed what I really love to do, is creating these short form videos. And it's interesting that you were mentioning about how Frontline had a long average view time, because my videos are relatively long for TikTok. They're almost a minute or a little bit over a minute long. And when I do those shorter videos, they don't do as well. So I kind of stick to like my 45 seconds to a minute video, and things that I find interesting usually do pretty well.
John, I'm going to stick with you for one more second and just ask you, are you actually able to make a living on this alone now?
Yeah, so it is definitely hard. One of the benefits of working for a regular corporation is to have, your steady income. Now I am living off what I'm doing as far as brand deals and sponsorships. But it's not as easy. It's a little bit more stressful, and I'm always worrying about what my next paycheck will be.
Raney, back to you for a second. Just how important were other platforms to you? How did you land on YouTube? Why was this such a big hit, and were you doing as much with others?
So, I mean, certainly we were very active on Facebook, especially when, algorithmically they were favoring news. Like, we were huge, and we're still really big there. Instagram is a little bit harder to grow to be like huge, right? But it's a great community. Interestingly, on TikTok, first of all, YouTube is a great search platform for video, right? So for us, it was like we make big films, so it was the most obvious new platform to go onto, in the sense of like, we would thrive there, if we're going to thrive anywhere. And interesting, the top search term that surfaces Frontline is documentary. So as you all know, right, like documentaries are really hot right now. So it really was a kindred, the form that we typically make, which is the documentary form, is going to thrive there. On TikTok, really interesting. We are going to launch on TikTok. We have to figure out, like obviously someone like Dave's early, John's early. What is Frontline's secret sauce there? I will tell you, we were late to TikTok, so late that this son of mine actually noticed that, like, no, we hadn't claimed the Frontline TikTok channel yet. So he's very clever. He claimed it for us. He just registered that. And then, did you notice this? And then what happened is, we were like, wait, my head of audience was like, our TikTok channel has been taken by an individual. And I'm like, oh, this is my son, Arjun. I'm like, I marched down the hallway because he's in remote school. I'm like, what did you do? He's like, well, you guys are like a year and a half late. Someone is going to steal it. You're going to have to buy it. It became like a whole story at PBS, right? So we obviously got the TikTok channel back, but we're still, we're slow moving on this, but we're planning something. We'll share soon. We like to share after we've actually done stuff, before we've, maybe failed a little, and then we'll start to share. But another crazy story, right? There you go.
That's
I will
smart.
say one of the things that, oops, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I remember seeing, it might have been somewhere after he had claimed it, you had all put a logo on it, but I remember seeing, oh, Frontline's here, but they hadn't posted anything yet. Because especially early on, I would go and look, and there was a NY Times account that had been claimed, and I intentionally followed it as a joke, and it was just this guy, I don't know who, and he had a really random TikTok post of just him dancing. It clearly wasn't the New York Times, and that's all the posts followed for like over a year, was this fake.
That's nice. Thank you very much. He's like becoming, he's like you guys. I love him,
Smart.
but honestly, he's so fast. I'm like, I get it. Thank you. So anyway, I'm a huge admirer of your work too, John. I love your stuff, and Dave, I just love it. I think you guys are form breaking on the form, and you're teaching me a lot, and all of us a lot.
Raney keeps creating these great segues. Hang on one second. I just, for anybody who is not familiar with Dave's work, or who has not actually looked at his TikTok in the last week, I want to play one quick video, and now I'm stalling. I'm going to share my screen. This is one of his recent videos.
You want me to tee it up while you're stalling?
No, I think I'm good. Can you guys see that?
Shining up low, yeah, low, shining up low. She hit the floor, shining up low. She hit the floor, shining and the boots with the fur, yeah, the whole damn club, they were looking at her. She got the baggy sweatpants, Reeboks with the straps. Where she turned around and gave the booty a smack. She hit the floor,
Forgot about the booty smack.
Do you get you make faces very well on camera when you're watching your own work? Is that weird?
No, it's just funny. It occurred to me as we were watching, I was like, this is one of the first times that I think I've like had to be there while other people watch it. I'm very used to just like posting it and just like forgetting about it for the rest of my life. So
It's like a stitch.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I wanted to say about that, just to kind of jump on what John had been talking about duration, is more recently, we really have realized that it used to be TikTok would encourage like 11 to 19-second videos. That was supposedly the sweet spot, and it still very much can be. But we have found that when they are longer videos and they are engaging, that is like the true special sauce, because if it is engaging and it's 45 seconds to 60 seconds or longer even, that's going to do way better. It's those sort of 4 or 5 second, almost Vine type TikToks that might do really well to start, but then they kind of burn out very quickly. So that's been something that's, I mean, as a news organization, it's the best thing in the world, because now we've been making these longer TikToks, not just, ones like that, but also like super informative ones about misinformation that are like over a minute. And if you keep them engaged the whole time, those ones do really well. So that's a big development, I would say, over the last like year-ish.
Well, it is funny, right? I mean, in a lot of ways, all of the platforms, YouTube, as Raney was talking about, used to be considered this sort of short form thing. And they, YouTube, the platform itself, established incentives basically by saying, if you're 10 minutes or longer, for those of us who had advertising, they said you could add multiple ads. You could do mid-rolls and you could do as many ads as you want, but only if your content was 10 minutes or longer. So that became, and then they moved that back down to 8 minutes. But they played with length in the same way. And now you see, thanks to TikTok and thanks to John, Dave, and all of your cohorts on TikTok, you see that Instagram and YouTube are doing shorts and reels and trying to bring content back. How much of a difference did that make in terms of what you are doing? Do you find that craft, and this is for all of you, do you find that craft and that thought process is very different in terms of how you think about the content that you're making?
I want to make sure I understand it. So just in terms of like taking news and putting it onto TikTok, or just like thinking about duration?
How different is it to make a 15-second video versus a 60-second video, or a 10-minute cut versus an hour-long cut?
Right. Well, the huge wonderful thing for me is, what a lot of the stuff I was doing early on, which you'd mentioned a little bit, was like these long interviews with kids, which are really fun, but they were like 5-minute, really quickly cut. It was basically like 10 TikToks in one clip in terms of editing power and time. And so now there is something, selfishly, I would say, pretty gratifying about being able to spend less time on something that does much better, much more quickly. But I do think that the one thing that's been really nice is, it's not that production quality should be lower, but you don't have to necessarily worry as much about production quality as I used to from some of my YouTube videos. I can, as long as I have like decent lighting and a good script, I can sit there in front of a camera and talk about something for 15 to 60 seconds, or some of those more creative TikToks. But that is really nice when people are much more concerned or interested in what you have to say. As John said, something he really cares about, like that's just going to come through. And we kind of have a small TikTok team at the Post now, and I tell them all the time, like, if you're not having fun or interested in what you're talking about, or even if it's a silly TikTok, if you're not enjoying it, like, people pick up on that really quickly, especially on TikTok. Especially the main difference being between TikTok and YouTube, it's more built like an app, in terms, like it's more like Tinder, so to speak, in that you're kind of swiping. And so people, it's not as if you have to just like grab them by the throat or something right away, but they do want to feel engaged, because otherwise they're just going to swipe up. There's no reason for them to stick around if they're not interested.
Yeah, and actually my skill, I'm just going to kind of piggyback off of that. Like my skills of writing scripts for TV news, I knew like they had to be short, sweet, to the point. So that's why my videos are a little bit longer, because I want to pack that information in there. And I know a lot of creators that just ad lib and just do their videos off the cuff. For me, I can't do that. So that's why I'm like, I usually prepare Sunday. I usually write all my scripts out and then record them, and then kind of schedule when I'm going to be posting those videos.
That's pretty similar to our workflow. We've been doing that more often. The scripting really does make a huge difference, as much as you can. Even if something changes in the middle, like that makes it way more efficient, as any YouTube, anything, whatever. But I think people would be surprised to know how much goes into planning a TikTok.
Raney, I'm going to frame that a little bit differently towards you. I think you were talking about Instagram, but one of the things that I think I saw on Instagram, it was a very long time ago now, but the summer in Syria, when that sort of, there was something that you guys did on one of your social channels probably 4 years ago, connected to one of your films. And that is how we used to think about social, right? Was like, let's promote.
Yeah, I think so. We originally started with these platforms definitely as promotional tools, but we found out pretty quickly, like those just don't do well. Promotions don't do well. Our promo team is trying to take their promo work and make it work. And it never really flies. Like, I just feel this generation just like sniffs out promos. It's like, it's brutal, man. They're like, oh yeah, whatever, we're being promoted to. And like, that's not real. And you see it in the comments and you see it, like the views they just don't watch it. So we do have a small digital video team at Frontline that does more native to the platform short form. And right now, because Facebook changed so much, we're frankly in the middle of like a rethink about what are we going to do with that unit? What are we going to make? We love making new things. We did a huge interactive this year with Yoruba, and it was like this massive multi-platform effort, but that's very different than like, that's using installation art and web interactive work, right? That's very different than what we're talking about here, but it's still figuring out what works natively on these platforms is so important. We just launched a new big Instagram effort that I think is going to be really interesting. That's again, really using the platform as opposed to just putting a Frontline, bam, right in the middle of it. So yeah, and the platforms keep changing, right? Their priorities change. So, and these guys are the best at that, but really listening and seeing what's happening to how, you know, like for example, a Frontline YouTube film started to go down to like 2 minutes as a watch time. That would be alarming, right? The thing that's happening on YouTube for us is people are just watching for longer. So we're doing something right for that audience, right? We're telling them stories that are meaningful enough for them to stick around. I mean, that's very important in our democracy right now, just to have like a democracy moment that younger people are watching, you know, vetted and authentic news, you know, in the form of a documentary, however they get it, it's great, right? That's why I'm like platform agnostic as long as the work is factual. Okay, that's the end of my lecture, but that is a lecture I like to give a lot.
Well, speaking of which, we're going to do a lot of talking later on this afternoon about YouTube analytics and all sorts of things that Raney was just talking about for those of you who are sticking around. But Dave, I just want to ask you one other question on this. You know, that video which you did, which is awesome and has had what, 2.5 million views in a little over a week, or not quite a week, 6 days, I think.
Maybe a week. Might have been a week ago. It all blends together. It was definitely last week.
Yeah. What is the point of that in some ways, right? Like it's a great video. It's super fun to watch. Is this aimed at converting viewers? Is it aimed at marketing the brand? Is it aimed at, you know, spreading the information that's in there? What do you see as your sort of objective with videos like that one?
Yeah, this one, this is a really good example because it's very specific. You know, there are over here, you kind of have the more, as I've alluded to, like more informational ones. We have these ones called Misinformation Mondays that are very much about like the sort of making this generation more media literate and understanding what is real and what's not on any app. So you have those more informational ones, and you have kind of over here, just the pure one. We are doing less of these now, but early pandemic was just like, everyone's going crazy at home. And those were the TikToks. And this had a little bit of that vibe to it. This was one of the ones that was kind of in the middle, where it was like, okay, we're back in here. Dave is still in an apartment, and he's now multiplied himself, and he's singing this Beach Boys sort of song that's actually the lyrics to Apple Bottom Jeans. Anyway, so we were trying to, in one way, just go, yeah, this is a TikTok for the platform. This wouldn't work anywhere else because this audio is trending on TikTok and has been for a while. And this is just how TikToks look on the app. So it's very clear that we produced and made this for TikTok. And I think that there's a big appreciation for that. There is something we call information takeaway, and we really focus on that a lot. In this case, the information takeaway was more about just the general numbers that we were putting out in between some of the sort of just like, we've been here for a while, Betty White died, but there was the actual numbers about like how many people have been vaccinated. And there is some of that information that we snuck in there. This one was a little bit lighter on that. I would say on average, like a 30-second TikTok is going to have a little bit more information in there that we jam pack. This one I just kind of let fly because as I just knew people would have fun with it. But one of the points you also made was this is a I would call it like almost a tentpole TikTok where we are trying to bring in new followers with one like this. Like we know it's going to be attracting people and they're going to have fun with it. And this one did, I mean, this brought in about 40,000 followers in the last week. So it did effectively do that. And then once they're there, they really do start to engage. And there is like a level where even when I first joined the Post, a lot of the people that it was called the creative video team, and a lot of us had been hired specifically to be hosts on camera. And the Post does kind of subscribe to that idea still, that connecting with a person on camera, whether it's in a Washington Post live on the main channel or TikTok or YouTube, that is significant for a viewer, and they do want to kind of recognize faces. So now we have 3 people that are on camera for TikToks, and that has been really effective in terms of creating that trust with people. First starting sometimes with just a joking TikTok, but then over time, maybe they'll actually stumble across one of our much more serious TikToks about what's going on with Russia and Ukraine, and they stick around. And that's actually exactly what happened last week, because the next TikTok we posted was like much more in-depth thinking about what was going on with Ukraine. So I know that sounds like a very meandering answer, but it really, that one specifically hits a bunch of different buckets, which is why it's one of the ones I like a lot, but also, good views too.
That's great. News, you have a question. I just want to ask Dave one other thing, and then I will come to you, Dave. The other question that I thought was interesting for this group is just, do you consider yourself a journalist?
Yes, I do think video journalist is, to be more specific, that is kind of like where I started out my career. I had told you, I think, a little bit about this before in previous conversations. I sort of fell backwards into video journalism. I'm the first to admit that. I was much more interested in sort of the satire, but also just comedy writing side. So in college, I joined a journalism program just because they had potential internships with the Colbert Report, which I eventually was able to do. But while I was at the Colbert Report, I was like, hey, this stuff with the 2012 election is pretty interesting and also simultaneously hilarious. So I got really into that. And by the time I was in DC, I was working at a smaller startup. I got a lot of training in video. And so when I was hired to the Post, I was hired as a video journalist. So that is still my occupation, though. I do think that I will also often go by the TikTok creator title, mostly because I want to feel like we are part of the app. I don't want to feel like we're foreign to the app when other people that have downloaded it, your 15-year-old sons, they probably see me more as a TikTok creator, and that's great. But also if they see me as a video journalist, that's even better.
And John, I would pose the same question to you. Do you still see yourself as a journalist first, or how would you describe your work?
I would say that I am a creator that has been trained journalistically. Through time, since a lot of my videos aren't specifically newsy, they're more lifestyle, I would say I'm more of a creator.
I also want to share one of those, but Anus, I'm curious for your question.
Thank you, Wonbo. Hi, everyone. Good to hear you all and see you all. I'm Anus Thapa, CUNY JLM, and I'm currently working as a video producer for The Street. And The Street has also started its own TikTok channel where I'm leading the production. And we're trying to figure out how TikTok works. And I must admit, as a traditional video storyteller, it's a weird. TikTok is a really weird place. We are so struggling to to make our niche videos for TikTok. Anyway, so this question is for especially Dave and John. And Dave, I've been following your TikTok since pandemic, and your videos are really interesting, funny, and sometimes they are boring, but most of the time they are interesting. And what I notice is, Dave, your TikTok is more about humor or comedy sketch and less of information. However, like John's TikTok is more about giving information, this is the place, these are the history, and less of humor. So Dave and John, like, how do you guys prioritize humor versus information?
Let me go first. Okay, I'll go first. All right. Yeah, I think, for me, I look at everything as a case-by-case basis. So if this is a story we're working on, making a TikTok about, and it feels like the delivery would have to be very serious or mostly serious, then that's what it is. If we are looking at a TikTok script or a story that we want to make, and okay, this could be a little bit funnier, then we're going to do that, because in my opinion, that's still where TikTok is. I think the majority of the videos, at least I'm seeing on my For You feed, are still leaning towards humor. And I think that's what our page was built on. But I think that is kind of the direction we should continue going. It would be very off-putting for any of our 1.2 million followers if they followed us and all of a sudden it's just all straight serious TikToks. Now, that said, every so often, one of those very serious, longer ones about misinformation or whatever comes through the cracks and does really well. And whenever that happens and our followers see that TikTok, because they don't always do, it's always a positive reaction. So It's just about kind of choosing which TikTok and which story works for each tone. But it really is, and I don't know if this really answers your question, but it is a case-by-case basis. And I guess if I feel like it can have a little bit of humor, I'm probably going to add some humor in, because I just think that matches what the page has been doing.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one, because I started my page with more informational, and I know that people follow me not because of me, but because of the content that I produce. And since the content that I produced was taking off with more educational and some serious tone, I just stuck with that. Every once in a while, I will throw like in my script, like maybe write a line that's a little more sarcastic, or like say things a certain way to see if people catch on. Sometimes they do, which I love, but in general, the ones that really do take off are the educational ones.
That's a perfect segue. I did want to share. Oh, sorry.
To add one thing, I was thinking as Dave was talking, and John too, that one of the things that I've seen just, studying this environment a little bit is like, they might watch Dave's funny video, but then when they're getting these like alerts on news, like on another app, right? They're getting like either Google or whatever, Google News. It's like they want to go to Washington Post more because they think it's cool. And then all of a sudden they might be reading something. It's very circuitous how, this generation is getting news right now. We're trying to understand it, right? But that's one of the benefits I could see from doing this, just in a humorous way, and in the way that John does it too, is to just be more personal and get people in the door, have them understand and laugh and be alive. And then maybe they'll wander into these other corners that are journalistic too. It's just an interesting new ecosystem to think about like that.
I completely agree. That was, sorry, I'm just quickly added. That was part of my whole presentation to why we should even be on TikTok. That was very much a big part of it. Was like, they don't even know what the post is, and now they will, for starters. And so that was, a big part.
I'm also playing publicist for Dave, so this is another good source for prompts and ideas. But I also did want to share one of John's videos. So I think I've got that queued up. Can you all see that? Cool.
Subway secrets. If you ever walk through the Times Square subway station, you might not have realized you passed a secret entrance. Just steps from the shuttle is this store with the sign Knickerbocker on top. And while the entrance is now sealed, it used to take people directly to the bar inside the famous Knickerbocker Hotel. It was so popular that it was even nicknamed the 42nd Street Club. The hotel was built by John Jacob Astor and opened in 1906 and had more than 500 rooms. Now, that was a year after the IRT opened its first subway line, so Astor wanted to make sure he attracted the people coming uptown to come straight to the hotel. So that's why there was a platform entrance. And once people were inside the bar, they would see a 30-foot mural of Old King Cole and his Fiddler's Three painted by Maxfield Parrish. And after Astor died on the Titanic in 1912, the hotel was taken over by his son, Vincent Astor. But it didn't last too much longer. The hotel closed in 1921, and that famous mural was moved to the St. Regis Hotel.
John, I chose one in which you did not appear. You have a bunch of different styles of doing things, but can you tell us a little bit about that video and your process on that one?
Yeah, this has been on my mind to do for the longest time, and I finally did it maybe a couple months ago. And that was like after the shuttle construction on the shuttle stopped. So I said, let me just do it. And I like to like name my series. And this one, I love alliteration. So I did Subway Secrets, and that took off. Now, some people were watching the video and thought I was going to give like Subway, the sandwich store, secrets. And then they actually found out that it was more of the MTA. But that got, I think, almost 1 million views within the posting time of maybe like a couple of weeks. It was like 1 million views. But that actually sparked the New York Post to write an article about my video series. And I said, I guess this is a good series to keep up on. So I then discovered other subway secrets, the lost and abandoned subway stops that were on the 1 line or on the 6 line. I did videos on that. And then another thing was the subway globes that kind of are colored either green or red, but before they were yellow, was thrown into the mix. And that had a whole meaning behind it. That one also went off. And I loved the comments because a lot of them were about like the native New Yorkers. So since I'm kind of my own business owner, sort of say, I had an idea like this could make a good pitch. So I emailed the reporter that wrote the article at the New York Post, and she loved the idea. She goes, let me talk to my editors. And she ended up writing an article about that. And that article then sparked Newsweek to write an article about my entire series. So that was one video that really kept giving and giving.
And just on that topic, I mean, in terms of when you're thinking as a business owner and as a business, as a brand, what are some of the things that you didn't expect? You know, like where are your sources of revenue? How different is that process from being in a traditional newsroom?
Yeah, so I am part of the Creators Fund, and you make nothing. And then I thought, well, maybe once I pass 100,000 followers and I'm part of the TikTok marketplace, then I'll start getting brand deals, and my revenue will go up. That wasn't the case. But what happened was I actually became friendly with a lot of content creators in New York, and they were kind of explaining to me, well, you need to kind of shift from being a journalist and just creating videos to being a marketer. And you have to create a media kit with your demographics and your rate cards. So I created that. And now I reach out to brands. On occasion, brands will reach out to me, but content creators are making their money by reaching out to brands. And that's kind of been working for me so far. But also I can't just rely on TikTok, because when Instagram went down a couple of months ago, that also, I was getting anxiety, because I'm like, all right, what if something happened to TikTok in one day and it's not around anymore? So then you have to think, well, maybe you should create your own website. Maybe you should create a podcast or do YouTube videos, make an extension of the history videos, because the reception has been so positive that people want a little bit more, because I really just skimmed the top of history.
I am plugger extraordinaire today. So we're going to talk a lot more this afternoon about things like monetization and revenue sources and things along those lines. But I am curious, for those in the room who aren't familiar, John mentioned the Creators Fund. So basically Meta, Facebook and Instagram, and TikTok have creators funds where basically there's a pool of money and creators get certain portions of that money, and that's how TikTok gives them revenue. YouTube works very differently, where it's basically you get pre-roll ads, you get mid-roll ads, and those ads you actually do a rev share, so you get a percentage of the actual profit from the advertisers directly. And I guess, so to John's point, we'll talk a little bit more about why, and this is a very topical issue right now. There's a creator named Hank Green who just put up a video that has totally blown up on YouTube last week, talking about the problems with the Creators Fund. Raney, I want to turn to you and just, do you guys use advertising, and why or why not?
So currently, I know this sounds like an outlier here. We currently do not have ads on Frontline documentaries domestically. And that's a choice that we've made to not be sharing revenue with YouTube. I know it's counterintuitive to this crowd. I wanted to say out loud, I'm not an individual creator. If I was, I would be doing everything that John just mentioned and really going for it. And I think your idea of your videos a little bit longer on YouTube, I know I would watch them. We'd all watch them. Please do it. I can't wait for you to just do that. But for us, we've decided right now, domestically speaking, we are public media. We're publicly supported to be ad-free. We are doing some monetization experiments internationally. Interestingly, we're just trying to see, in pockets where Frontline's not being sold as a television show, in those pockets of the world where huge growth internationally, as you can imagine. I think 20% of our growth this year is international. So there's a huge hunger for Frontline overseas. So we're seeing in certain places, should we be doing, some experiments around monetization? But we can always turn the ads on, and that's another, revenue flow for Frontline down the road if that's needed.
Are there challenges with that too? We were talking a little bit yesterday. I guess what I'm pointing to is moderation. And
Sure. I'm really, really hoping things get more fair and equitable on these platforms, and that there's equality when you're sharing revenue. That's the kind of goal. And then I think that for us as an investigative series, there's always the question of advertising all over your work when you're investigating them. But commercial networks do this all the time, and they're fine. So I think it's more a matter of, with Facebook and others, we've been trying to keep our work non-commercial. Again, I know that sounds very earnest, and it's not maybe forever, but for right now, just have our work without commercializing all over it, with the open door always to having to think more about sustainability in the future. You can bet we are. We're always thinking.
One of the big issues though with advertising, sorry, what I was trying to get to was advertiser friendly content, so things that are sponsor friendly. Is that something that you deal with even without advertising?
Yes, it is. And I mean, and even the frontline shows that are on the broadcast, we're constantly making decisions about what's appropriate, right? Like a great example is if somebody comes to us and they want to put a government ad on for vaccines even, right? Like we have to troubleshoot all the time, optics, perception, and, you know, inherent conflicts of interest, right? To have government content on Frontline, that just doesn't work for us. But there are other shows on PBS that do that are less investigative. So this is a really complex area for Frontline and public media in general. We don't have all the answers. We're like thinking about this almost daily now.
Thanks. I do want to encourage everybody to raise your hands with questions. Caroline, it looks like has a question.
Hi, really grateful to be here. I loved everyone's insight. I used to, or still kind of work freelance in long form documentary, but I'm having some interviews with marketing agencies that do social media. And I've never really considered that. I mean, I scroll through Instagram and TikTok all the time, but I've never made such content. So I was wondering, is making that content inherent, or what was your learning process? Was it, do you think like some people have to, is it something that's learned or comes from within? Yeah, I'd love to hear about your process.
I mean, I can speak about like in terms of when I created my videos. If you scroll all the way down to the page, you'll see how I've changed my flow of creating videos, because I would usually start with like a boring shot. And when I was taking the 219 West class at J-School, I remember, you know, never start with a boring shot. You want to show an action shot for the first like 2 or 3 seconds. And then you learn as you go along what works. So, you know, since you're in J-School, or, you know, since you have a background in journalism, you kind of know, or it's in your blood of creating videos that captivate people.
Yeah, I to piggyback on that, I don't, as far as the marketing part goes, I intentionally, there's separation between me and that department of the Washington Post. However, in terms of like appealing to people in videos and that aspect, I think that is very much everything John just said, but also it is learning by doing for me. And I think it's just that even really is what he just said as well, but you just kind of keep doing it until you figure it out. I think my background at my previous job, where I was making a lot of Facebook videos, and then we were doing Vine, we had a Vine account for a couple of years. I learned a lot through those. And I think by the time TikTok rolled around, I was very well prepared and positioned to kind of create videos that were going to attract people the right way. I remember something that it was some major takeaway that Facebook was telling everyone at the time, and I think it's still true for any online video, is if you don't see someone's face within the first 3 seconds, you're probably going to scroll up. And that is something that we definitely think about while making any TikTok, is that, are they going to see a face, one, that is talking to them, and two, is it going to be a face that they recognize from previous TikToks, which is why they followed us in the first place. So there are a lot of things like that you pick up along the way.
Thank
Can I ask
you.
a big broad question, which is just, what's your favorite thing about the platform that you work in? Raney, what do you love most about YouTube?
Okay, the thing I love the most is that sometimes we have to shut off comments, but when we do keep our comments on, what I'm really intrigued by on the YouTube platform is what I'm perceiving from all the comments to be a really very bipartisan conversation. It's not that people agree, but it's people of all political persuasions are actually on YouTube watching Frontline. And to me, you know, I really want Frontline's content to not just be in like a partisan silo, like a progressive silo or a conservative silo. And like when I see those conversations going wild, you know, sometimes obviously when it becomes dangerous or racist, we have to shut it all down. But there is this moment where a conversation is happening that is not what you would think on YouTube. And I'm just dying when I'm watching these, you know, these smart, young, hungry, you know, intelligent conversations where people disagree is my favorite thing.
And that's very different from, you know, broadcasting, where you don't actually get any feedback. Like, it's just really like you put it out there and there it is.
I mean, and you get letters, maybe, thousands of letters, people complaining to you about everything from all sorts of things, but you don't get to see that real time interaction that what we have been most surprised by, and we're studying this, is how multi-partisan, I would say, because it's not just bipartisan anymore, right? Where you're really getting the sense that people on YouTube are not just progressives or conservatives or independents. It's really all over the map, and people who are international,
Yeah, I mean, the comment sections, I agree with you on that one, because there are times when I'm about to post something and there's a little bit of anxiety because I know that either the response will be extremely positive or extremely negative.
Yeah.
But there's a thing that I did about like the old nightclubs that were in New York, and the comments that I got from people talking about, oh, I used to go there, or that's where my mom and dad met and now they've been married for 20 something years. I would never expect to hear or to read some of these comments. And then I did something recently where I asked people what was their wish for 2022. And it got so personal. And because I made that video, I feel like I actually connected a little bit more to my followers than I have ever before. Of course, you get those negative videos as well, but those negative comments as well. But you kind of just have to delete them, or just not let them ignore you. But I'm not let them bother you. Sorry.
I think we would all be surprised to know that people had met and married at the Limelight. But Dave, how about you?
So surprised. No. Yeah, I think one thing too is you definitely have to have thick skin at a certain point when it turns negative. But I would also echo that our comment sections are surprisingly not only very the back and forth and collaborative and people really having conversations, but also just for the most part overwhelmingly positive and even wholesome, at least amongst our followers. When a TikTok goes really viral, that's when you find other people jumping in, and then it can be a little chaotic. But for the most part, it's a really great place to be, and we very intentionally are replying to the comments as much as we can, both in with serious replies about maybe someone has a question about the news story, or we just kind of joke back and forth with people. For a long time, there's been these bots that pretend to be someone like looking for a boyfriend, and we always respond to the bots as if we think they're real people, and people have really gotten into that. They started to reply before us, so now these bots the only problem, of course, is now they're like multiplying, because the people who make these bots, we get a lot of reactions from them, so all of our followers are replying to their bots. So there's that, and that's even actually the other part I was going to say is jokes and just memes and all these other aspects of TikTok, specifically sounds, all build on each other on the app constantly. And it's really fun when we get to be a part of that. Love to be part of an inside joke. And so it is very much like how the platform was built. And a somewhat recent example is when they had Alabama Rush. There's like all these different Rush TikToks going out last August. And I was just waiting, I'm like, how can we be a part of this? And then unfortunately, the Delta variant started spreading. And so we did a TikTok where we were talking about how you could rush Delta V. And we did like a whole chant with Delta variant, Delta V, and it just did, very well. And I think you actually, you learned a lot in the TikTok, but also it was very clear that one, we kind of got the joke and what was happening on TikTok, and two, we clearly were present on the app. I think people appreciate it when they realize that this news organization or creator understands what's going on right now in the moment. And so you feel like you're a little more equal, as opposed to just some brand coming in and just telling you to buy their newspaper or something.
And last question, cognizant of the fact that last question for me, if anyone else has questions, raise your hand or put them in the chat. But since this is a group of students, do you have any pieces of advice on skills that they'll need, or things that you found really useful in your career along the way that helped you get to where you are?
I would just say my only advice is just be a great storyteller, on whatever platform you're on. Like, I think we're all telling different types of stories here. We're all journalists and, working in a fact-based, landscape, but, and study form. That's the one thing that I did as a young person. I fell in love with documentary as a form, even though I was a writer. Study what you love. Like, I love the question, I think, from Caroline, right? It's like, well, if you love short form content, go for it. You just got to love it, watch it, breathe it, live it, and then you'll be able to make it. It takes time, but it just feels like it's intuitive once you know what you love to do, in terms of the form.
I love that answer, and I would also just say that I think you can borrow even from other things. If if you're doing long form and you love short form, pull it in. But Dave.
Yes, I'm always afraid to give advice, but I don't want 10 years later, someone's like, we were in a Zoom call and I took your advice and now I've just been fired. No, but I think what's really worked well for me is especially early on in my career, I was very much willing to help out in any situation. So for me as a video journalist, it was like, hey, we need to dress this set, or someone needs to help light this, or can you help me edit this? And so even when it was the boring aspects of the job or something that maybe I wasn't as interested in, when I was helping to collaborate with other journalists or other creators or whatever, that is kind of a version of pay it forward, and they always want to help you out whenever you need help, whether it's creating a video later or working on a story or something. And that also sort of echoing what we were just saying is that then you can take those skills that you learned and apply them elsewhere. And that's exactly what happened with me. Is I didn't really have any background in video for the most part at all. And then all these skills I picked up just from helping people out on sets eventually helped me get the job at the Post, and then were especially helpful in creating TikToks by myself in my apartment. So it does pay off at the end if you start to just kind of pick up different skills along the way. I think it's pretty easy to apply them at a certain point.
Yeah, the one advice that I would say is don't be afraid to try something different, because I was petrified to leave my job. But it's working out, and you just have to learn how to be like that one-man band as you learn as to be an MMJ. You kind of become that if you are your own content creator. So just don't be afraid to do it.
Awesome. We do seem to have 2 questions raised. We are at time. John, Raney, and Dave, do you have time for 2 more questions? Cool. Andrew, I think you were first.
Yeah, okay, thanks. And thanks for doing this panel. This has been really wonderful. I find that Twitter is a really good platform to getting out short videos, and also being able to sort of do kind of parts 1, 2, and 3 and sort of sequence, whether the sequence happens right away or over a period of time. You guys haven't talked about using Twitter as a platform, and just wanted to throw it out to the panel to get your thoughts about it.
I have used Twitter, I think, as effectively as I could have in my position so far. So I'm really glad you brought this up, especially when we first started TikTok. I used it as a way to sort of boost that the Washington Post was even on TikTok. And it ended up getting picked up by a lot of different sort of like in that DC, New York bubble of journalists, people were posting all the time. So that was a really great way to sort of get it out there. And even since then, especially since the start of the pandemic, I've been making a thread of our TikToks. And that's been a really great way to sort of just show progress over time. And people joke a lot because right now the thread's at like 975. And they say every time I add one to the thread, they see the first TikTok again. And they're always just like, I will never, every day I log on and I see this stupid tweet from Dave from the beginning of the thread. But people really actually have come to quite like that as a way of sort of keeping track of something. So that's it. And you kind of made that point, Andrew, which is just, you don't have to necessarily post things all at once. In fact, I like to use Twitter as a sort of ongoing thread, especially with videos where you're sort of updating something as it comes, because as soon as you do that, that top thread goes to the top tweet on the thread goes to the top of people's news feeds. So Twitter can be very effective with video in that way. And I think Twitter, the company, recognizes that because they keep trying to experiment. They had Twitter fleets and all these. I think they recognize that video does pretty well on the platform. So it's really good for me for cross posting.
Yeah, and I would say Frontline uses Twitter really effectively, and often we use it all the time for our short videos and also just promoting our big films because we originate in video. So it's a great platform for that too. So just agree with you, Andrew, and also Dave.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of just look at it to check the news. I don't really post to it, but I used to use it all the time just as a journalist.
Well, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
And I think the last question goes to Anus.
I didn't want to let this opportunity to go away. That's why this question is for Dave. Dave, who approves like TikTok video pitches on Washington Post? And second one is like, I remember you changed the logo of Washington Post because some lady on TikTok suggested to change it. Like, how did that happen? Like, is that like, did you had to pitch that changing of logo to your editor before you do that? Can you walk us through the story?
Sorry, I missed the second question. Can you repeat that?
So I remember you changed the logo of the Washington Post TikTok channel, right?
Oh, the logo.
A lady
Sure.
suggested something on TikTok, and then you changed it. Like, did you like?
Texan graphic designer, I think.
Yeah.
Yes,
Did you pitch that to
I
your
majored in
editor?
graphic design. I'm so glad you brought that up because I'm doing my campaign to let everyone know that we were first, and it's been driving me crazy that McDonald's got all the credit. It makes me so mad. So she was making those. She made a couple of those videos, and then we commented. I commented as the Washington Post, hey, can you help us out? And so the next video she made ridiculous. She said the Washington Post, and she said I put in George W. Washington, which was just an old weird picture of George W. Bush. It was an intentionally terrible logo, and so I said that's perfect. We should just make it the logo on our page. And my manager reluctantly agreed. And so we very intentionally took a bad screenshot of her standing in front of it in the green screen effect. So like part of her head was in the corner of this bad logo. And we made it that, and then we replied to that video, thanks so much, or something like that. And you could see our logo in that reply. And then about 50 brands did it in the next 3 days. What is very nice about the Washington Post being, sort of a 24-hour news service is because there was someone I could talk to at 7 p.m. and be like, hey, can I change the logo? And like, okay, fine. Whereas I think these other bigger corporations had to like go through 50 people to say, yeah, you can change McDonald's to this like insane McDougal's, whatever it said, logo. So yeah, that was just kind of let's just roll with it. That's what TikTok is, and that's the platform. And we should, going back to your very first question, it is for us, humor first. At least that's how the app has been since we started. And so we should lean into the humor when we can. And that's that story. And then as far as approval goes, which I guess is related to that second, I do have a manager that has to approve every single TikTok. In some cases, the script, we will, I would say 90%, because I know what works and what doesn't, we'll script it out and shoot it first and then send it to her. Because sometimes it can be very difficult to like explain what we're thinking in a script before to get that approval. So I have enough trust there where I can make the full TikTok and then she will say yes, or she'll run up the chain if she's concerned it's not going to work. But every TikTok is based entirely on an article that's already been posted by the Post. So it's already fact checked in that sense. But yeah, every single TikTok has to run through at least one person, if not multiple people, before it's posted.
Thanks.
So I promised one other thing. I have already mentioned the fact that I'm plugging like crazy. So anybody who's staying for the class, we'll take a little break and we'll meet back here at 2 o'clock, same link. And then Raney, I had promised we didn't see a video of Frontline, largely because they're hour long. But there's a great, this is a little promo that I promised that I would share, which is for Yoruba, who is on faculty at Newmark and the head of our documentary program. It's a film that she co-directed, which premieres on Frontline on February 15th. Raney, is that right?
Thank you.
Nearly 1,000 Negroes are marching through the center of Natchez. Martin Luther King's approach did not work in Natchez, Mississippi. They met armed terror with armed resistance.
The Till Act held the promise that we might get to the bottom of some of these cases that had never been solved.
The bomb slaying of civil rights leader Wallace Jackson. I relived this thing over and over again. Hope for some justice.
Premieres Tuesday, February 15th, 10, 9 Central, only on PBS.
And Yoruba says hi, Wonbo. She just said, I told her you were playing her promo. And she's like, hey, guys.
Well, everyone should tune in for that. And everyone should come back here in, let's say, 15 minutes, maybe 5 of 2 to stay for this afternoon. But Dave, John, Raney, I can't thank you all enough. This has been so wonderful and enlightening, and really, really appreciate your taking the time today.
Thanks for having us. It was awesome.
Thank you.